If you Google the West and switch to your government-backed and patent-pending news tab, you'll be met with the newly elected US President's Greenland Gambit, Chinese espionage, hybrid tactics that target the West, literal transformation of the Western Hemisphere, the general informative red pill news you'd expect. The news tab for the East has weather reports. Granted, there's this article from the Counterpunch, or as I like to call them, CP. The Washington philosophy is that by disrupting societies it can't control, it retains its grip on the planet's wealth. But that boneheaded worldview is already hopelessly outmoded. Just look at the Chinese economic powerhouse, surging forward no matter what Uncle Sam does. Okay, what? The winter storm blankets the East Coast. What is thunder snow? Wait, this says east, but it's meant as a geographic location. Same here and here and here and here. What is happening? Has anyone noticed this? How do you even use the word boneheaded in an article as the same person? Hey, I'm Thomas. In October of 1884, the International Meridian Conference, which was held in Washington, D.C., has selected the Greenwich Meridian to be the common zero of longitude, meaning anything aiming to the left relative to this map is west, and anything aiming right relative to this map is east. You can have any other projections of this map and this rule should still hold. If you divide that by the equator, the line that separates the planet into the northern and the southern hemisphere, now we have a geographically mapped out the west and the east and also its northern and southern counterparts, which doesn't necessarily make it more obvious since you can go up north until the point where you're going south, but you never end up arriving in the west if you continually go east, since there's no actual pole of west and east. Or is there? Geography is not helpful with this, since I don't think our dear Eve Ottenberg, journalist and an author of works such as The Booby Prize or Bonkers, which I'm sure everyone has heard about before, also meant the Falkland Islands, which are located on the Western Hemisphere. Actually, the only country west of the meridian that was mentioned in this piece of shit were the United States. 15 times. The next place was India with 10, Ukraine with 8 and Russia with 6. The top most mentioned country was China with 20 mentions in this article. Fun fact, this article perfectly dodged naming the UK or Canada by only referencing to them by noting the Anglo-Saxons' relations of the US. What is this, the fall of Rome? Philosophy. This divide is less apparent, since you can theoretically divide the world into the Western Judeo-Christian traditions and Eastern Oriental traditions. It can work perfectly, actually, if you want to gaslight someone into oblivion by knowing some particular details and realize how complicated this shit is. Okay, so Western traditions. Roots in the philosophies of ancient Greece and Rome and Abrahamic religions such as Judaism and Christianity. Let's start with the philosophy. Aristotle has regarded Thales of Miletus as the first philosopher. Of Miletus, an ancient city established as a Greek colony on the western shores of modern-day Turkey. These colonies had direct contact with people coming from the eastern parts of the world such as Persia or Lydia. At the least, you have to admit that there was a possible mix of cultures and traditions. The extent of the influence is questionable, but that's besides my point. The origin of the philosophy and way of thinking that has emerged from all the way back to our modern Western philosophies is unknown at best and possibly not even Western at worst. The traditions that the West currently exhibits are inadvertently Western because of the cascade of history following the schools of philosophy coming from Greece. And the Abrahamic religions, well, there's a clear divide and tangible data on the spread of these religions throughout the Western world. There is no point in arguing whether Christianity or Judaism had any effect on today's society, because of course it has. But Islam, also an Abrahamic religion, also spread throughout the whole world, and I do not think the collective Western society will ever agree on its being a Western tradition, which I personally think is stupid, since fundamentally and in very oversimplified terms, it can be as similar and as much different from Western religions as an individual decides it is. Is it Oriental? Is it Western? Surely the eastern half of the world is less divided in this, it's the same incohesive spread. See, you can separate the world into regions of similar values, religions, and philosophies, just not at a scale where you can point at the entire Western Hemisphere and yell, "Hey, look, idiots!" I'd be too ignorant to say that there is no clear difference and no understandable divide between the numerous nations and societies of the entire world, because there is, like work ethics, family values, or the rights of an individual, tradition, or innovation. It's just that it works the same the other way. There are not a lot of ways to connect them on a larger scale than a country. They are all the same species, they are all on the same planet, they actually want to live life, which is nice and fair, totally same as you. You can see how this can become a bit of a stretch. What's the point in trying to group up such a complex and irregular phenomenon such as, well, society, if it's nearly impossible to do when our brain is wired to see the monkey brains from the next village as different and inferior to us? Oh, it's all politics. The lizard people want you to fight the mean Americans. Now, I like delving into history to get a bit of a sense into the realities of the modern world, as I'm sure so do you, dear viewer. And I'm also sure all this talk of West and East made some changes in your state. You may feel cooler, colder, Cold War-ish, nuclear winter. Yes, the Cold War we knew. Some of us lived through and some of us only learned about it in school, has ended in the late 1980s, early 90s. Now, I am a stick figure with 4 types of animations, barely any backbone to argue with historians and scholars that have debated and analyzed the whole subject. But calling this a war in the first place was a mistake. A conflict? Absolutely. You can have a conflict with your neighbor's dog. That's totally acceptable. A war of nerves? Absolutely. That's what happens when you attempt to scare or frighten your opponent before a battle. What I have an issue with is that it's not really certain when it started or ended. A war ends by one side winning and later issuing the peace terms to the losing side, or by both sides agreeing on peace because they were obliterated by the nukes they store in the respective third world countries. Did anyone actually declare a war? Yeah, you do see some quotes coming from important historical figures from those times that might have indicated that some stupid was going on, but we would later all just agree on the fact that it started at the end of World War II. When did it end? By the 1990s, where the Soviet regime was disassembled and replaced. I totally accept this as an end to the war by the standards of the historians from the 90s. By our standards, the nukes are still there, proxy wars haven't disappeared, leaders of those countries are not talking. I'd love to hear your opinion on this, because there's really not a lot keeping this nice and cohesive. It's a mess. But not as messy as this magnificent, financially backed by your favorite Chad, GigaChad, Russian Sigma, informative piece of critical journalism. Now, you might be saying, Thomas, it's just another one of those troll articles. This woman is a nobody, who cares? Well, it's one thing if this entire site, which I dubbed CP, is just very misinformed and clueless, and another if this is a plot to muddy the waters. That is why I propose this answer to your question. There is no West or East. Politically speaking. Not only is it obvious from her writing, where the entire point of West can be translated into the US, but also by the fact that whatever East is that she is so willing to back up is just bricks, and she even failed to mention half of the fucking group if she meant bricks. Why don't you just name the countries you mean in the title? There was a guy that tried leaving a comment on a bunch of my videos because they kept getting automatically deleted by YouTube, and I don't really remember the full details, but I do know it contained the words West and Russia, and that was enough for YouTube to mark that as a bot, I assume. Now, I don't really support censorship like this, since I believe anyone should be as stupid in public as possible so they can learn, which is what I'm also doing right now, but for once I don't think this is a complete mistake. There is no West and East because it's essentially still just a Cold War. The only difference is that while during the Cold War you could mark the red team and the blue team, so obviously US and the Soviets, cringe and based, good and bad, it's not so obvious to people now. And the reason for that, I think, is because whatever the West is, thinks that the war has ended. It hasn't. This is literally a psyop. No, I swear, we are not talking just about the US, it's the whole West, that's what's wrong. Who is the West? The only reason I refuse to talk about Europe, by the way, is just out of spite, because oh well, some nerds said that it's just a US vassal anyway, and proceeded to talk only about the only 2 base prime ministers that are coincidentally not in Western Europe. It's language made up to confuse you. How the hell does this keep happening to us is beyond me. There's no point in studying history if it is this easy to just repeat it. There's so much shit happening on your screen that you don't even know who your enemy is, so you just mark them with a geographical direction. Call out bullshit, state your opinion directly at the stuff you read, and if you get called out for it, you should be prepared to learn stuff you haven't heard before. I genuinely feel bad for people running this site, just living in this state of unconscious ignorance and bad web design. I bet at least their pockets are full though. I should write them an email. Anyway, thanks for watching. Leave a like, join our Discord. We are very anti-West, red-pilled, anti-establishment Sigma Redditors. We also have memes. Sometimes.